everybody. I'm here today with Momodou. What do you want to call me? Do you want me to call you by your full name or like
Nah, Momodou's fine. Momodou's
Momodou?
fine.
Yeah. Just to talk about. I've known him for a while now. Just like not well, but just right through social media, just chatting about stuff. And he's talks a lot about kind of the black experience within the Muslim society and also the black
hmm
experience in general. So I just wanted to speak to him about the kind of stuff he's sort of working on. So if you could just quickly sort of introduce yourself, man, and tell us what you're doing, what you're about, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, my name is Momodou Taal. How do I even, people have asked me this time and time again. I'm just like, what do I say? Um, yes, I law graduate. I studied Islamic sciences. I learned Arabic in Cairo, Egypt, predominantly in Al Azhar Mosque and also in other institutes privately. I'm also involved in, you know, political activism or trying to provide political education on my platform. I guess that's how I introduce myself.
Okay, so how long have you been at Al Azhar for? Like, what brought you?
I moved to Egypt about 5 years now.
Okay, so it's long.
Yeah.
It's a long sort of
Yeah. So
stint.
initially you come and learn Arabic, um, then I finished like not finished, was like a preparatory stage to get into the university, and then I didn't go to university. I went to the mosque, which is like you get like an ijaza from the mosque, which is like an Islamic license in Sharia.
Okay, that's cool. What do you plan to do with that then when you're done? Because
If
obviously,
I'm honest with you, nothing now.
okay,
If I'm honest, because I think my I've kind of shifted my direction. When I maybe like 4 years ago, I had wanted to become an Islamic scholar,
okay.
uh, but not anymore. I don't envision myself sitting in a mosque teaching.
So what was your plan now?
Initially, now I mean I want to pursue go to grad school, pursue kind of a PhD in history and Black studies, and hopefully, you know, try and provide political education in some capacity.
First start off with Palestine very briefly.
hmm
Um, so obviously this is like obviously a sensitive issue for us all. Obviously this has been going
Yeah.
on for decades now unabated. So I was just wondering what your kind of position was it right now, as obviously it's quietened down a bit than it was the last few days, but it's still
Yeah.
obviously a serious issue. So I was just wondering what your thoughts were on the current situation.
I mean, if you help me hone that question down just a little
Yeah,
bit in
sorry,
terms
that's too vague.
of
How do you have any sort of I what would be your position in terms of resolve trying to get it to a more peaceful situation? I know
I
that's a
think
deep question. Sorry.
yeah, that's like almost impossible to answer. I mean, what we
Yeah.
can do, we can talk about what the situation on the ground is. Obviously, we
Of
see
course.
we see that it's a legacy of settler colonialism,
Hmm.
and it's obviously an occupied by definition of the ascription of the United Nations. This is an occupied territory, illegally occupied territory. The position of the most governments is a two-state solution, but it seems obviously we have a right-wing government in Israel that doesn't want to abide by that, and they're actually encouraging people to settle in different places, in different houses of those who are owned by Palestinians. Obviously, those who know the state in Gaza and West Bank, it's like an open air prison. Um, so yeah, I mean, my thing is that I'm just against oppression wherever it manifests itself, and naturally, I feel like I'm not in Palestine, so all I can do is hopefully lend my voice in support. But in terms of the solutions, I always say that Palestinians should be the ones that are the ones at the forefront of what they want to call for. I'm not in a position to say it should be a two-state solution. It should be a one-state. That's not my position. I
Absolutely. Yeah.
believe that I believe that the kind of intellectual source of struggle needs to be those who are directly confronted by that violence. And then all we can do is be in support of those who are oppressed.
Oh, yeah. I'm on the same point. Like obviously as somebody living in the West, obviously I
Yeah.
can have a position to the best of my ability.
Yeah.
And as a Muslim, I'm obviously more sensitive to the to the Palestinian sort of plight, but
Mm-hmm.
in terms of like policy, it's not really my say. I think obviously it's undoubtedly it's systematic oppression and settler
Yeah.
colonialism. And I have several like friends of a Palestinian background, and
Mm.
just the trauma it's caused their families is just
Of course.
is unimaginable for someone like me that's been lucky to be brought up in this society. So
Yeah.
yeah, I just wanted to quickly talk about that because I haven't made a podcast in a long time, and
Okay.
I talk about this kind of stuff sort of on Instagram and TikTok, but I just wanted
Yeah.
to have a brief kind of discussion with you on your thoughts of that. So to get into the base of the conversation, so you're obviously you come from a very like a pro-black perspective, and you speak about race relations in society.
Mm-hmm.
What besides being of that heritage, what brought you to sort of to that to be your primarily focused?
Like, I think it's hard to pinpoint the exact moment I decided to adopt a quote unquote radical posturing or radical politic. But what I can say is that there's been several events in my life that led up to me, despising racism. What comes to mind immediately was I've had racist encounters in school from the age of like 14, 15. And these are very interpersonal relations, being called certain things. And then obviously what then happened that like in conjunction with me having these racist experiences, I was exposed to Malcolm X. And after being exposed to Malcolm X at the age of 15, 16, he became like my hero and my lifelong hero, and someone who I just wish I can be, like be like or try and follow his footsteps, or at least try to push his dream for justice just a bit more, just a bit further, or make it a reality. So yeah, that's kind of the background for me. And then more and more recently, I'm seeing racism play out at a structural level as opposed to the interpersonal. I mean, I'm not really concerned if a white person doesn't like me. I'm not concerned. I'm not here to I think that's a very liberal posturing of let's let freedom of ideas, and you can be freedom to be a racist, and I can be freedom to hate people, and let's just sit around one table and debate. That doesn't do anything. I don't care about that. That doesn't do anything. It's like as Stokely Carmichael, Kwame Ture says. He says, if a white man wants to lynch me, that's his problem. If he has the power to lynch me, that's my problem. And I think that's what I'm thinking. So my thing is, I don't care honestly, I don't really care if someone is a racist personally, but I do have an issue if they have the ability to act on their prejudice. Mm-hmm. So that's why I think of racism at a structural level. I don't like institutionalized racism. Those things that should be challenged.
Yeah, it's not so much the individual racists. It's more like the power structure. I mean,
I don't think you can change that. I mean, the thing is, I know you're meant to be asking questions, but I would ask you. I mean, I assume you're white, yeah?
Well, yeah, I obviously am. In terms of how I'm treated in society, I do benefit from that privilege. Obviously, I mean, I do have some other background in me. Yeah. You can't really see it in my face. So obviously, in society, I'm treated as a white man.
So my question to you then is, when you hear let's say what I say or black people speaking, it's not an experience you can directly relate to. So what's your response to that?
Just to be sympathetic and take people's word for it. Like I'm not going to tell them they're wrong because I've not experienced that level of discrimination, and I've witnessed it to a certain extent as well. Like I've certainly had black friends in my life who I've noticed even if it's very subtle, a different approach to them by members of the public or police officers and people, even staffs in shops, just the small things people wouldn't even think about. So I've witnessed those kind of microaggressions, and I've witnessed some kind of blatant racism in the past. When I worked in retail, a friend of mine, his security guard is a big guy from Eritrea,
Yeah.
And one time he had to pin like a thief down on the floor while the police was coming,
Yeah.
and he was like just blasting all kind of expletives at him, like and like slurs at him. So
Yeah.
I've witnessed it to a certain extent. Obviously, that's not my experience, and I also try and look back historically as well because I have to learn from history, not just the history that maybe doesn't affect me, but the history that affects
Yeah.
others,
Mm-hmm.
and the history that has affected my own ancestors. Because
Yeah.
being like my great grandfather was Maori from New Zealand
Oh,
on
wow.
my dad's side, so I have some knowledge of that. I
Yeah.
try to learn from that as much as I can. Obviously, I'm not really connected to that culture.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously to a lesser extent, like obviously being somewhat Irish as well. That's
Yeah. Okay.
something to reflect on. We were just talking about how racism had affected your life, and I was just saying about what I was saying about
Yeah. I
mine.
mean, the thing is, for me, it's like it's the easy part is to talk about how racism personally affects you. But one thing I don't like to do is to make people's like trauma or my trauma into my politics, because I think it becomes very reactionary.
Yeah,
When really and truly, I'm trying to anyway be a bit more principle driven. So yeah, that's kind of my stance on it.
yeah, absolutely. So, in terms of, I wanted to speak about race relations within Islam, just from
Yeah.
your experience. Um, it's quite a controversial topic in some
Mm-hmm.
ways because I've tried to discuss it with people before, and
Yeah.
I've some people have said that because the Prophet preached against racism, that therefore racism doesn't exist in Muslims, and that's not true at all. Um, so I'm just wondering what your experiences with that have been compared to like the wider society.
I mean, it mirrors it. I mean, there is something that exists called Arab supremacy, and not just that. I find that unfortunately, there is anti-blackness that exists in Muslim communities, and that's probably a global phenomena. But particularly, I can speak from the UK perspective or the UK context.
Mm-hmm.
In the UK, absolutely, anti-blackness is rife in the Muslim communities, and it manifests itself sometimes very overt, but also very covert by way of microaggressions, by way of delegitimizing the Islam of Black people because it's seen as inferior, or delegitimizing um, what Black people may know when it comes to Islam.
Yeah,
So yeah, so I've seen it manifest in mosques, in madrasas, and almost most Black people in the UK, I would say, have some kind of negative experience that involves like encountering Muslim communities and their Blackness coming head to head with each other.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've definitely witnessed that myself
Yeah.
to some degree. Um, Also, like obviously, I don't think it's to quite the same context as it would be with you, but like as a as a white reaver, I've sort of
Yeah.
experienced things that are a bit like I would say maybe not racist, but just strange. So,
What's an example?
um, just like sometimes the way I'm spoken to by other Muslims, like I don't know anything. I
Mm,
know they mean well, and they're not doing it
yeah.
like necessarily maliciously, but like I've had a lot of struggles with people like trying to like lecture me on the religion and like, oh, you need
Yeah.
to do this and you shouldn't be
So
doing
when did you become Muslim?
that. Just over a year ago, so not that long
Okay.
ago. Um,
Okay.
I took Shahada in during Ramadan last year,
Wow.
so it's almost exactly a year. Um, so it's been pretty mad. Like it's very different for me because
Yeah, I
like
can imagine.
from
I can
I feel like
imagine.
uh sort of white English culture is very different to
Of course.
most
Of course.
Islamic ways of doing things. Like
And the Muslim community you're around, what is the kind of demographic?
mostly because I worked in central London.
Yeah.
Um, and that's sort of how I discovered Islam. Really, just speaking to Muslims is like
Yeah.
uh, Muslim friends. A lot of my just like my brethrens, and like
Yeah.
one person influenced me particularly on a personal level, and then it's just sort of stemmed from there.
Okay.
And I wanted to really just to learn really because
Yeah.
I was doing youth mentoring. I still technically am it, but I haven't done it for a while because of COVID.
Okay.
I do like youth mentoring where I mentor an at-risk like young person and like take them for days out and activities and stuff.
Yeah.
And so I was working in Eastland and there was predominantly Bengali sort of community. So I just wanted it was also to learn about it through that context because I feel like as somebody as sort of an outsider, like obviously I'm still like working class, but like I'm a white guy from the south of England. It's a different way of viewing the world. So it was important for me to not be too detached and learn in that sense. And I just read the Quran, and it just spoke to me, I guess. And I studied a bit, like I watched a lot of podcasts and just became more and more interested. It just
That's super interesting. I don't intend to interview about you, but
no, of course,
in
this is
terms
discussion.
of in terms of like, because I'm sure now by now you would have seen all the intra dynamics that exist in the Muslim community by way of the trends.
Yeah, and
So
I'm trying to find a place.
Do you know have you been attracted to particular people or?
In terms of culture, I love like my Bengali friends and that, but like I've turned to go more towards like African Muslims.
Okay.
So like West and North African, like Maliki and because I just feel like there's there's like a similar level of sense of humor and similar sort of interests.
It's quite relaxed.
And like maybe with the like obviously not everybody because there's people in all groups, but like
of course
with the South Asian community sometimes it can be a bit tense, like in terms of cultural differences. So because like I have good friends from Morocco and like Algerians who I know, and then like a very good friend of mine is from Guinea-Bissau, and he's
nice.
He's not a very strict Muslim, but he is a Muslim, so he sort of inspired me in a way because he's a very good character. He has a very good soul. So it's just a journey, I guess. Like,
of course, and again, I mean, the thing is, I think faith in and of itself is a journey that you will, spend your whole life figuring things out and relearning things, unlearning things. So,
like, I wouldn't say I'm the most intensely devout Muslim.
Okay.
But I've making an effort. Like I've stopped certain behaviors that I used to get up to.
I feel you.
No more like girlfriends or like binge drinking. So
I feel you.
So actually, that's sort of a similar point. Like, so have you always been like quite religious, or is that something you came to as?
I think it's very interesting to talk about what is it. I mean, first and foremost, what does it mean to be religious? But if you mean like in common understanding amongst Muslims in terms of practicing, then I would say I took Islam more seriously at the age of about 16.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was 16, I decided to take Islam more seriously. This was like a few things, a friend in school, the autobiography of Malcolm X, different figures. And then from that point, it's just been a journey for me. Like I've, continued trying to grow my faith. And naturally, you have moments where your faith isn't as strong. But again, for me, that's a part of the journey.
Yeah, I think we all have highs and lows. I mean, I know it might sound like a bit of a cliche, but nobody's perfect, are they? Like we all have we all make mistakes.
Exactly.
And it is a journey. So, I mean, when did you start learning about Islam? When you're like 16, did you say? Like
at 16, I started learning with a particular group of people, and then about 6 months after that, it wasn't really hitting the way it should be hitting for me anyway. It wasn't really, And then again, like you said, you mentioned the Maliki Madhab. I met some Maliki teachers who like what they spoke, and I was just really impressed. And then I remember going home to my family, asking my mom and my stepfather, what are we? And they said, oh, we're Maliki. I was like, oh, well, no one ever told me that. And then I started researching into like Imam Malik and his methodology and the spread of his madhab in West and North Africa. And I thought, yeah, I like the
Yeah.
way they see things.
I'm more obviously I'm more of a civilian. Like I'm not an expert on like fiqh or anything.
Yeah,
Like I go more towards the Maliki sort of
yeah,
way of viewing the world. Um, as I said before, like a lot of the friends and people I know, it's like they're more
yeah,
in that mindset anyway. It's interesting as well. Like sometimes when you speak to somebody about what what madhab or they
yeah,
belong to, they're like, "Oh, I'm Hanafi or I'm Salafi," or
yeah.
whatever. And you're like, "Okay, what does that mean?" And they're like, "Oh, I can't really tell you. It's just because my
Yeah,
parents."
yeah, yeah. It's very culturally, isn't it? People have like a nominal kind of attachment.
Yeah, yeah. I think obviously there's predominantly. I think it's predominantly Hanafi in the UK,
Yeah,
if I'm not
definitely. I mean,
mistaken.
that's predominantly in Sunni Islam, it's Hanafis
Yeah,
anyway. Yeah,
I think especially with the larger South Asian community like Pakistanis
yeah.
and Bengalis, they tend to be more that way. I mean,
Inclined,
some
definitely.
people like Dear Bundy and stuff, but there's not as many.
Yeah, I mean, even the Hanafis, they split up into Deobandis
Yeah,
and Brelvis.
yeah. So it can be quite it's very interesting when you get into Islam,
Yeah.
how things work and how you think it's one thing
It's
based
this
on
whole subworld, isn't it?
yeah.
It's literally its own subworld. And that's why I asked you what your take has been, because unless you're raised into it, or unless you're from the outside, it looks very uniform.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
From
If
the
you
outside perspective, you think, oh, it's just one group of people who are all Muslims.
absolutely yeah. If
Yeah,
sorry, 5 years ago, if you while I was in university, like partying and stuff, if you would have
yeah.
told me that I'd be a Muslim, I would have laughed at you, like because I wasn't an atheist at that time. I was an
Okay.
atheist when I was like 12, 13,
Yeah.
but then I got over that because I just thought it was a bit silly. Like no offense to any atheists that might be watching.
Yeah.
And then I was sort of more of agnostic, maybe sort of
Agnostic. Yeah.
humanist sort of
Okay.
type ideas, and
Yeah.
then I became increasingly aware of the existence of God,
Okay.
just from like experience I had, and just this like I guess an inner fitra, as we say.
Yeah.
Um, and then like my dad's family aren't really religious at all.
Oh, okay.
They say they're atheists, but like I don't know if they disbelieve in the idea of God, but that's just a blanket term they use. My dad's into like new age stuff, like crystals and like tarot cards.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting. How did your family take it then? Don't mind me asking.
Um, they were surprised.
Yeah.
It's variable. It hasn't been like awful. Like
Okay.
I've been blessed in that sense. Like I haven't had any
Yeah.
massive arguments with anybody. I mean, people have expressed disagreement or like
Okay.
sort of they said that they think that I'm down the wrong path, and I said, well, that's cool. You're entitled to your opinion. Like I disagree.
Yeah.
Um. Yeah. So my dad's he likes to joke about it a lot.
Yeah.
Like at first he was sort of quite against it, and now it's just like he uses it as like a banter thing.
Oh,
Like,
okay.
it gets a bit tiring at times, but that's just the way
That's the way he kind of
he copes
communicates.
with it.
Yeah.
And then like my mum's side are like quite devout evangelical Christians, like my granddad
Oh, wow.
and my uncle. It's not really a friction because they're not so much in your face unless you ask them about it. So like,
But I think if you look at it is the British way not to really speak about religion and politics anyway.
yes,
You know what I mean?
yeah, definitely.
They relegated it to kind of a personal affair.
I try not to discuss it either because it just ends in like you'll be having a nice day, like having a nice lunch or something, and then you'll bring up that, and then it just ends in like
And it just descends into chaos.
chaos. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any sort of specific stories in terms of like race relations within the Islamic community that you could talk about without
Yeah,
going
I
into
mean,
intense detail? Obviously,
no, it's not a big deal. I mean, the thing is that it's not. I just tell you because you asked, but it's not my way. I don't really center my person. I said to you before, I don't
Okay.
make my politics. But I'll tell you anyway. So, for example, again, you know how you spoke about microaggressions. You witness microaggressions with your black friends. You see the same thing play out sometimes in mosques. So I remember two distinct stories come to mind. was one time I was in the mosque, and then people come up to me and goes, brother, let me show you how to make wudu. And I'm just like, I've been Muslim all my life. Like I'm studying Islam. I can probably tell you how to make wudu actually, if anything. And it's a shame because, and again, just making excuses for people, it comes from a good intention. But the only reason why I'm being approached with that is because literally you've seen the way I look, and you said to me,
Absolutely.
oh, he's a black person. He must not. Again, I told you, it's like the delegitimization of my Islam. Another time, I remember praying Asr in the mosque, and then I was with my friend who's Pakistani, and then we walked out, and a guy came and said, salams to him, and then, just looked in my face and said, MashaAllah. Like he was so happy to like this black, wherever, Jahili or this ignorant black person in a place of worship.
Yeah.
So those things are microaggression. And I think it's just a shame because, the legacy of Islam in West Africa is very rich.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Extremely rich. And I think that's just a shame. But also, those are things that have happened to me directly. As for things in which I witnessed or which I've seen, there was a famous da'i, Imam Ustad in a mosque in Birmingham, who I think it was 2018, at the first 5 days of Ramadan, there was non-stop stabbings that occurred amongst Muslim communities.
Okay.
The kind of victim and perpetrator were Pakistani, South Asians. And then, this Imam thought he was doing a great thing. Sometimes you get those moments where people think they're doing a great thing and then they're like, yeah, that wasn't it. So he came out in the streets of Birmingham, a very busy road called Ladypool Road. After iftar, people are busy. After Tarawih, so people are all out in droves. And then he said with his mic, brothers, we are not black. Stop behaving as if we're black.
Yeah.
Allah does not like, and he stopped.
I think it's weird to sorry to interrupt you. I think it's weird to specifically put certain traits to a race or like
but that's what happens. People deal with race as pathology.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
They deal with race as if to say these specific, and that's why I say it's all race, it's all eugenic science. Because the minute you say this is exclusive a black thing, when we know race is not real, race is a construct. So there's nothing about my blackness determines that I'm going to have baby mothers. You know what I mean? There's nothing, nothing about my blackness that's going to determine that I'm going to, be, what's the word? Like, be aggressive, for example, or be a sexual predator. There's nothing about this fact that I have melanin on my skin. But again, when you deal with race as pathology, as it's like attached to the person's race, that's what you're going to get all those things. And you hear in the UK, in the UK, there are things black on black crime. Something to do with black culture. Okay, but how come the same things that are positive in those cultures, it's not attributed to black culture then? Some of the youngest people to attend the most elite universities in the UK are black kids. But again, it's not black culture then. Or some people doing attending the best universities and getting the best results. I'll give an example right now. The highest educational attainment in America right now is Nigerians.
Yeah, I've heard that before.
No one says it's black culture there.
Of course.
But it's black culture when it's negative. So again, I can't talk about race when it's pathology.
Yeah, I think that's just a historical legacy of.
It's racism, isn't it? It's just racism. It's just racism.
Yeah, obviously.
So again, so to kind of circle back, this Imam said that brothers, and then after I did my research, I searched him on YouTube. I found another talk of his. Another talk, he was telling people, predominantly young group of Pakistanis, he was telling them, why do you lot act like you lot are gangsters? You lot are not Jamaican. Again, so then, and then the thing is, when you call, and can you imagine he got called out? I called him out. I actually did a whole podcast on the Baraka Boys, and I dragged him to filth, and he wasn't even repentant.
Well, some people will never change.
Bigots. It's bigots, isn't it? You know what I mean? And I think it's but again, for me, it says more about the institution, if I'm honest, because why are you platforming people with those views? Like, I could never imagine, I can't, a mosque or wherever I am, let's say it happened in a mosque where it said it. Let's talk about that context. I could never envision a place or a scenario where I'm in the masjid the mosque, someone says something so overtly racist and no one challenges it.
Yeah.
I find that for me, I'm gobsmacked. And I watched the video, no one challenged.
Sorry, it needs to be challenged, obviously. Like, I think that's people are not comfortable, especially if somebody's of a high status, like they're an imam or a sheikh or something. They're not confident to say, like, what you've just said is just absolutely ridiculous and there's no basis in science.
And I've got myself into trouble. Yeah. And I don't mind. I mean, people know me. I'm very much like, so I don't want to say I'm confrontational. I can be perceived that way, but I'm not. I'm a very direct person. So and I've called out scholars before. If scholars say some nonsense about like racist stuff, I'm going to tell you directly why that was wrong.
Yeah, I would too.
And if you say it in public, I'll do it in public.
Yeah, I would too. But then like at the same time, the response to that is like, you don't know what you're talking about, and how dare you question somebody of a higher authority?
I think it's crazy. I think it's crazy. I mean, you know, as the Prophet said, "Kullu bani Adam khata." Every single child of Adam is capable of making mistakes. Yeah. You know, and then as Imam Malik says, Imam Malik obviously he taught. For those who don't know, he taught in Medina. He taught in the Prophet's mosque. Those who know the Prophet's Rawdah is buried practically next to the mosque or in the mosque. So, and he taught in the mosque, and he said, Imam Malik says that every single person can be criticized except for the person who occupies this grave, and he pointed to the grave of the Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So that's my MO. Yeah. Okay. I do not obviously criticize no prophet, or not, you know, astaghfirullah. I even get close to that. I'm scared of that. You know what I mean? You know, that's our intercessor on the Day of Judgment. But in terms of anyone other than that, I'm sorry, you can get it.
Yeah, no. If somebody's just an average normal human, why can't I criticize them? Like I'm open to being wrong. If you show me evidence that I'm moving mad, then please show me. And I'll
exactly. Exactly.
But then I've seen that a lot. Like obviously I'm not going to name specific characters, but like when there's people saying something that I just think is awful, and it's like there's somebody saying, "Oh, you shouldn't say that. You shouldn't criticize him because he's a sheikh." Or like, but like, I remember one story. I saw a video once, and I'm not going to name the name of the sheikh, and he said that there was a woman who like called in to his like chat show thing, and she was saying that about her husband's cheating on her, and his kind of response is like, "You're probably too fat" or something, and I was like, "Is that really how somebody of Islamic thought should be conducting themselves?" Like. It's crazy.
No, but the thing is, you hear it though. You hear a lot of the look at if right now there's like a quote unquote cultural war, yeah. And you asked me about Hamza Yusuf and these people. I have Hamza Yusuf for me. I still recommend him to people for intro Islam. His talks on spirituality and his talks on like basic foundations. I have no issue with that. As for his politics, I think they're horrendous.
Yeah, I did watch the video. I didn't know about these allegations against him before you showed me, and he does go about in a weird way, especially in a very racist way towards
exactly. That's what it is. I mean, the thing is,
he dances around other communities and says like, "Oh, I'm not sure it could be variable," but when the black community, he seems to specifically.
And I think it's a shame, given the American context. I think to myself, who are you serving? Because the largest demographic of Muslims in America is the black community.
Yeah. And mostly
the majority of Muslims, and the reason why, not reason, but one of the reasons anyway, why people are so freely able to practice Islam in America, but as in the beard is not stigmatized, the hijab is not as stigmatized, is because of the struggle of black Muslims. They paved the way by being unyielding in their Islam.
Yeah, and mostly reverts as well.
Exactly as well. So my thing is that so who are you serving? But then you asked a simple question about police brutality, and then you said the breakdown of black community. Like you can. I don't understand. That's not, for me, that's not a response. You don't respond. It's like saying to someone, I'm going to give a trigger warning and a trigger warning here, but it's like a woman comes to you and says to you, "I've just been raped," and your first reaction say, "What were you wearing?"
Yeah, of course, it's horrendous.
For me, that's ridiculous. Like, it's when someone says to you, "The police are killing black people," and your response is the breakdown of the black family because there's no fathers in the home. to like make it make sense.
As part of the with regards to the rape analogy, to sort of compare it, if within Islam, obviously there's the lowering the gaze and all that.
Yeah.
Like, it's irrelevant whether she's like naked or she's in a niqab. Like, that's not for you to be going anywhere near.
But I live in Egypt, yeah. So I can promise you, it's not about what the woman wears.
Oh, absolutely.
And again, the stats show even in the UK that there's not a difference between women who get raped who seem to be more wear revealing clothes.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
There's stories of people who getting abused when they go to Umrah and Hajj.
Yes.
So like my point is that it's not that. And again, I don't even make the analogy anyway. Like I don't want to go on about it. But my point is that I feel like, again, you can have a conversation about what Islam says the guidelines of clothing are. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. You know, there's an aura, there's a minor and major aura that should be covered. Of course. And Islam preaches modesty for men and women. Absolutely. But again, you don't link that to people acting crazy and to rape. That's crazy.
That's not an excuse at all.
But as the black family, though, the black Hamza Yusuf gave that example. That's crazy to me as well. You don't say that. Okay, my point is.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Sorry, but my point was, even if you have a mum and dad at home, does that mean the police are now be like, oh, yeah, you've got mum and dad at home. I'm not going to shoot you.
Yeah, of course not.
You know what I mean?
It's police profiling.
Exactly.
They don't know what your home situation is. They're just
exactly
on the street, and especially if you're in a certain area, you're dressed a certain way, they're going to treat you as a I don't know, as a victim. So
yeah.
And I've lost my train of thought.
No worries.
I do that a lot. I've been up since like 7 a.m. and I've been around London, like doing all kinds of stuff. So I have another question for you that I wrote down. So, what do you think can be sort of done to move forward in that regard, in terms of race relations in both?
In what capacity? That's such a.
Sorry,
you have.
I'm sorry. I can be a bit vague sometimes. Sorry. I was getting to a point in terms of like within Islamic circles specifically.
Okay, I think that is education. I think that, and I think, don't get me wrong. I would be amiss to say like things are not changing. Absolutely, things are changing. One of my closest friends, Mustafa Briggs, he did a tour called Beyond Bilal, and that definitely changed the landscape of a lot of things. And obviously, for context, Beyond Bilal is people try to use the companion of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that his name was Bilal, known to be a black. He was a freed slave, and people say like, "Oh, there's no racism in Islam. Bilal was black," as if to say, which is the modern day equivalent of, "I can't be racist. My best friend is black."
Yeah.
Or my driver was black.
Yeah, of course. That's the point I was getting to earlier, actually, when I was saying about like, in terms of people using that kind of thing as an excuse to like say that racism doesn't exist within the community. I think that's pretty.
Absolutely. I mean, the thing is, we hear it all the time. Like somehow by your affinity or affiliation to a person of color, that now precludes you from your racism. That's not true.
And a big problem with that is, sorry.
No, Karen.
A big problem with that, I think, for a lot of people is marriage. So, in terms of communities that are very traditional and like have a very inward sort of tribal mentality, it's like, oh, you can't marry that person because they're not one of us type thing. I mean, that's definitely a big problem.
It's funny. I get that a lot. But I honestly, I've made a tweet the other day and I said that I pray that the race conversation in the Muslim community stretches beyond marriage. I don't care. Again, I'm not one of those people, like people always talk about, oh, if you prove you're not racist, let your daughter marry a black person. Huh? Okay. I'm sure at a personal level, it's very heartbreaking that the Arab or the Pakistani father said that you can't marry his daughter. I'm sure it's very sad, but that doesn't do anything structurally for me. That's not stopping. You know what I mean? That's not stopping
your point is the wider structural issues.
Always.
trying to eliminate that as much as we can.
Yeah, because I feel like honestly, I don't think you can change the hearts and minds of people like that. I think you can eventually. I think you can like over time educate, tell people. Because I'm sure we can all agree we've had views in the past that we hate ourselves for today. Well, I wouldn't say hate ourselves for, but we have views in the past that we will no longer carry those views. That's what you call growth. That's natural. But then that growth needs to come from a place of willingness to grow. Some people are just not willingness to grow, and unfortunately, a lot of people who are racist are not willing to give up their racism. So me thinking as a strategic position, I don't have power. I'm not head of a state. I don't have an army. So I can't force anything on anybody. But what we can do is we can attack structures. So at least if we can't eliminate racism in the hearts of people, but at the very least we can mitigate or lessen its effect on society. And that's my take on it. So like, for example, as for specifically Muslim community, then education, talk about as much as we talk about the contribution of South Asian to Islam, and it's a beautiful contribution. A legacy of Islam in South Asia is beautiful. The Mughal Empire, the Shah Wali Allah Dehwali, for example, Imam Chisti Saab. These people are like, they contribute to science of hadith, science of tafsir. Like the legacy of Islam in South Africa is beautiful and it should be celebrated, and it's something that should be proud of. Likewise, the legacy of West African scholarship is par excellence. You have Sheikh Ahmadu Bamba, Sheikh Ibrahim Niass, Abdullahi Niass, Ahmed Baba Timbukti, the first person to write a fatwa against slavery. Ahmed Baba Timbukti, the first person to write a fatwa, or one of the first people to write a fatwa saying that domestic violence is haram, is Ata ibn Abi Rabah, a black tabi'i. He taught Imam Abu Hanifa's stuff.
Okay.
So the thing is Luqman al-Hakim in the Quran. There's got a whole chapter dedicated to him, Luqman Hakim. There's a difference of opinion whether he was a prophet or a wali of Allah, a friend of God. Again, he was black from Abyssinia. Moses defined as black. Adam defined as black. So my point is that it's not about going back history and make everyone black. It's like, as much as the other communities get their pride from Islam, we all have a stake in it. And again, it's nobody owns Islam. It's all about Islam. Same way I should feel prideful about the contribution of South Asians, I should be proudful about the contribution of West Africans and North Africans.
Yeah, it's obviously like, as Muslims, we believe that it's the final message for all of mankind. So
exactly,
it's for everybody. And as you're alluding to, like, just recognizing the richness of Islamic history in Africa and of people of African descent,
and ensuring that it's a cause of celebration for everybody. That's all it is. You know what I mean? So I feel like I think it's unacceptable personally in madrasas in the UK that don't have a syllabus that focuses on the diverse regional differences of Islam. There should be a syllabus. Madrasa in the UK should teach texts from West Africa, from North Africa, from South Asia, their own countries, which most of them come from, and the Arab world. That should just be the norm.
Yeah,
because at least then you're producing a generation of scholarship that is aware of diversity of traditions.
That history in that region is absolutely fascinating. It's a shame that people are from not just Muslims, but people from all over the world.
In general, exactly.
Knowledge of that, like obviously, outside the religious scholars and stuff, you have other historical figures. I mean, obviously, like Mansa Musa is very famous for his.
Exactly, and the funny thing, Mansa Musa is known for his money, isn't it? Yeah. So, I mean, the more interesting thing is his brother, Seydou Suleiman Keita. His brother was, if you look at the book called They Came Before Columbus, his brother is reported to have gone to America way before Columbus went there.
Yeah, I've seen that myself. Yeah, there's people that believe that he went.
Suleiman Keita. That was the reason why Mansa Musa even became the Mansa, which Mansa means king, is because his brother abdicated the throne and left to travel the world.
And he may have stayed there. Like, obviously, we don't know what happened to him, but like,
he most likely did stay there. I mean, there's the reports that we have. We know that Muslims mixed with. We have like artifacts of like Muslim that were only found in West Africa that were found in America.
Okay.
We know most likely mixed in. Sorry.
How old are they then? Where have they been dated from?
About 15th century.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the world. The history of the world is so much more deeper than we think, isn't it? I mean, like
100%.
It's a shame, like with the people sort of place history as starting white colonialism, and like it's very unfortunate and obviously racist to frame it.
I mean, the thing is, it's like, it's unfortunate, but again, it's for me, I don't have an issue. Like, for example, when I think of like Socrates, Aristotle, and Plato, I don't see them as like figures of white society.
Oh yeah, no,
you know, I mean, but people do. People feel like, oh, this is like the forefathers of or the genesis of like white liberalism.
I think there's
or
people that believe in that they, maybe not with words that they actually said, that they inspired that idea of like, oh, look at all these great white people from history. We must be so amazing and like.
Exactly.
I mean,
and the thing is, like, for me, if you look at the works of these people, more often than not, even like the great philosophers of Western academia, a lot of them borrowed from Islamic sciences sources anyway. You know, and there was an interplay of like Islamic sources and Jewish sources and Christian sources that were also that, you know, that had an interplay with each other. And I think that's beautiful. That makes, for me, the human experience more rich. The issue I have is when you privilege one way of thinking over all others.
Yeah, I think it's about collaborating between different
cultures
and realizing that we're all the same underneath the skin, and like the whole idea of race is just pretty stupid. I mean, it's
100%.
unfortunate that people still believe that race is actually even a thing. Like, obviously it's been used as an excuse to oppress people. But the concept itself is ridiculous. Like,
it's outdated, man. I think people but again, it's like, if I'm honest, if I'm speaking to Black people as well, I'll say the same thing. Like, race, the idea of race, the construct of race hurts us more than it hurts anyone else. We were the first person to get rid of the concept of race. Because again, the minute you have race, you're going to have hierarchy, and you're going to have people who are going to be higher than others. So, you know, yes, I'm not saying don't be proud to be Black. Don't, you know, celebrating culture is beautiful. Celebrating Blackness is beautiful, but don't treat it as if like, you know, you are intrinsically Black. No, you're intrinsically a human being first and foremost, who has been racialized as Black, and your experience of race is different. Like, my experience of Blackness is different to my literal cousin who can look like me on the continent.
Of course, yeah. And you can be proud of your culture without trying to separate yourself from different people.
Exactly. I think the problem is, and I say this, you know, very just being frank, is I find the discourse in the UK, particularly from those on the right or center right, or just people, the average kind of white person, is they want to be proud of the parts of culture which dehumanize other people. So I find it very interesting. Like, I mean, why would you want to be proud of the British Empire?
Oh yeah, of course. I've I'm very vocal on that kind of thing when discussing with people, and people will say I'm quite critical of the British Empire because obviously obviously I didn't experience personally, but it's affected my own family in some way. So I would say how terrible colonialism or how terrible slavery was, right? And a lot of people will say, oh, but the British helped to stop slavery. That's such a thing people say to me all the time. I'm just like,
and it's not even true.
Yeah, I can't.
But again, it's not even true.
It's even if it were true, which it isn't. Like, that wouldn't
exactly. Even if it was true, that's the least you can do. You start.
Yeah. It's like, and people use it as that kind of argument as an excuse to sort of. They say they're not doing it, but they're trying to justify.
100%.
Like, oh, we helped stop it, but it's like, what difference does that make?
I mean,
if I punch you in the face, and then like afterwards I help bandage up the wound, I still punched you in the face.
You haven't done anything. Exactly. You haven't done anything.
Like,
and the thing is as well, it's not even, I think what's the dishonesty in that discussion is it's not even to do with, like, it wasn't a moral argument. There wasn't an argument of like, we recognize this institution of slavery to be an evil one, therefore we're going to stop it. It was, hang on a minute, France is expropriating and benefiting so much from Haiti that we no longer need the institution of slavery, and we want to stop them making money. So that's why. So the question is, how come simultaneously as Britain is quote unquote abolishing slavery, they're helping France to uphold it?
absolutely. I think it
But
was
but but they're helping for not to hold it for themselves, but to uphold it for themselves. They wanted Haiti to become their own colony because Haiti was a cash cow.
Mm-hmm.
So again, yeah,
I think it was largely about just squabbling with France. It was
yeah,
the British French sort of tension that still exists today to a certain extent. Like
yeah, exactly. I
I
mean,
think like there's a certain amount of indoctrination there. Like even me, I will admit this. Like I think it's normalized in that culture to have a beef with the French. So
yeah,
like as an English person, like I immediately will if I have a bad experience with a French person, I'll immediately think of oh, but the French did this and the French did that, and people like we've. It's very petty and it's indoctrinated into all of us, unfortunately. And I have to try and curb those
100%.
behaviors.
I mean, for me, it's like I mean, don't get me wrong. There's a lot without it being racialized. There's a lot to criticize the French for.
Oh yeah, historically, absolutely, and today, with
Give me 1 second, bro. Sorry about that.
that's cool, no worries. Historically, absolutely, and then today, obviously, like we can quickly go into that actually before we head off, is with the treatment of Muslims right now in the world
And exactly, yeah,
is appalling due to the dogma and the media twisting of like terrorism and stuff like that. So, I mean, like obviously we have in France like the banning of the niqab and the hijab stuff, and the halal meat thing there as well. And
yeah.
obviously we have Palestine, which obviously is not strictly a religious issue, but it's there's some connections there.
You can't separate religion from it.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously the Uyghurs, you know, that's just
Yeah, yeah, exactly. In China.
and the barefaced denial of that, and like so many weird interviews from with Chinese officials regarding that. Like, did you see the one? Did you see the one where you've most definitely probably seen it, where they showed the BBC, who I'm not a fan of myself, but like they at least they did this. They showed him this footage of people going off to the camps in this like very reminiscent of history type way, like getting loaded into trains and stuff, and he's like. And then he completely ignores the question and goes, "But the landscape of that region is beautiful." Did you see?
I've not seen that, and I'm glad I haven't.
Yeah, they asked him about what's going on here, and he's like, "But," and he just sort of barely looks at it, and then turns and goes, "But did you know that the natural landscape of Xinjiang is the best in the world? And like, look at those mountains in the background."
Yeah, that's so crass.
It's very sinister. It's really like a strange agenda. I mean, I don't know if you have anything to say about that, but
no, I mean the thing is, my stance is that I just hate oppression, no matter where it manifests itself, no matter who's the perpetrator of it. If it's in China against the Uyghurs, that needs to be condemned. If it's the West's imperialism, capitalist imperialism in the global South, it needs to be condemned. If it's in the West countries, as in France, it needs to be condemned. That's what I think.
Okay, yeah, I agree completely. I mean, there's very little else to say on that. I mean, I've always kind of been passionate about like fighting injustice to the best I can. Like, some people call me like a whiny liberal, but I'm happy.
Don't worry about it.
if that's what they think, at least I'm trying to make a difference. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly.
Yeah. So I think before we round off,
yeah.
I just want to speak very briefly about Malcolm X. I know you're obviously he's one of your favorite people ever because you talk about him all the time. Like I'm a really big fan of Malcolm X as well. Like obviously maybe it might not be specifically speaking to issues that affect me, but I think he's one of my favorite people in history. I mean, he's just to watch him and the way he transmitted himself and his observations on stuff was amazing. So how would you say he's inspired you and like why is he so important to you?
See, the thing is I have to write a book one day about it, I think, because words will fail me to speak about Malcolm X and what his impact on me personally, other than the fact that I can say, I mean, his sincerity, his kind of commitment to justice, his admittance of being wrong at times, and his love for his people. And that's the kind of things that I want to be able to emulate and embody. So a kind of commitment to justice, an admittance of being wrong, loving my people, and being against oppression in all its manifestations.
And yeah, there's amazing humanity of that guy. It's incredible, especially after he went back from the Hajj
Exactly.
and his insight into that, and like obviously he left the
Nation of Islam.
Nation of Islam, sorry.
Yeah.
And obviously, you know, he died in a very appalling, tragic, disgusting way.
Yeah.
And like the fact that he's not with us to see us into this.
I know, but it's funny because I feel like he's very he is a very prophetic figure in the sense that what he said that was, if not more relevant today.
Oh, of course, yeah. It's
like when you play
exactly
when you play his videos, you feel like, wow, is he speaking to 2021? And he's passed away in 1965. So yeah.
I don't know, the man in the saying stuff in the early 60s who would have think that
exactly
me, like an English guy in 2021
can relate to it. Again, that's what you call a visionary.
Yeah, he spoke across all. I think across all barriers, even though he was primarily on the black struggle. Like
no, but I mean the thing, he was an internationalist. He saw his struggle connected to people, oppressed people around the world.
Yeah, he's definitely was. My favorite thing, I don't know the exact quote, is when he spoke about after he went from Hajj, and he was talking about how the unity that he felt there between the Muslims and different cultures. That's one of my favorite parts. And like, as I will say, like, despite that we've spoken a bit about racism within the Muslim community, like, that's not to criticize the community as a whole. Like, it's just a beautiful religion to have.
Absolutely.
Barriers of like,
absolutely
perception and like race and culture and all this. It's this sort of silly stuff that we've enforced.
Absolutely. I mean, the thing is, Islam is a beautiful religion, and it has the ability, if we manifest it correctly, if we practice it correctly, it has the ability to cut through like a lot of the kind of constructions that keep us divided.
That's why it spoke to me, really. I mean,
yeah,
that's the biggest thing that spoke to me. Like,
alhamdulillah.
Speaking about the New Zealand heritage I have.
Yeah.
I was always like, I never really. The one was the issue of the Trinity and other stuff, which I won't go into in detail. But then, just thinking about the way, obviously there was Christians. Obviously, there's many Christians that have done great, amazing, beautiful things. But the way it was used to justify colonialism and forced on my ancestors
and slavery
and people of the global South in general. I mean, it's never something that sat right with me.
Yeah.
So that's why Islam was so beautiful to me. So
alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. I'm still not very good with the Islamic words.
It just takes time. It'll come eventually. Like, it just takes time and practice.
I say it more on TikTok because it's like I feel like I'm sort of performing.
Yeah.
But like on like normal conversation, I struggle. Like, so like,
nah, it'll come up.
I try and say, you know, assalamu alaikum and like stuff, but then often I make the mistake of not saying wa alaikum salam back, and I feel like a horrible, rude person. Or like I say, I say salam, like they'll say salam alaikum, and I'll say salam alaikum instead of saying alaikum salam.
Wa alaikum assalam.
So we're all learning. I'm learning.
We're all learning, man. Yeah. It comes off time anyway, honestly.
Yeah. So it's pretty good. Hopefully.
Thanks for having me, man. I've really enjoyed this conversation. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, brilliant, man. Nice to speak to you. Obviously, nice to
likewise.
Stay in touch.
Likewise.
Quickly before we go, just if you want to just say anything now, like that you're got planned, or like how to find you.
No, I'll just say, people, please hit me up on socials, The Gambian on Instagram, The Malcolm Effect, which is on Spotify and Apple Podcasts mainly, and also on Twitter. It's my name, Momodou Taal.
Okay, brilliant. Well, thank you very much. Great to talk to you.
Take care, man.
I'll stay in touch, and I'll
please do. Yeah. Hit me up anytime, honestly.
Yeah, I'll send you the details for this.
Yeah, let me know when it's out so I can post it.
Yeah, man. Great to talk to you.
Likewise. Thank you. Take care.
Take care.